6 stunningly spooky supernatural ghost stories. Remember to comment, like, subscribe, share, and ring the bell for notifications. Grim business at Twilight. First off, I think it's worth mentioning that this encounter happened on an incredibly beautiful evening, which I personally think made it that more unsettling. 5 or 6 years ago, my appearance was quite bohemian, and for certain reasons I functioned in a far more carefree manner. I was also extremely thin due to an eating disorder. All of this invited encounters with strange people, most of them pleasant, but there's one encounter that still leaves a bitter taste in my mouth. I was out for my routine stroll to watch the sunset from the local boardwalk. The boardwalk was crawling with people, all of them appreciating the same thing. The sunset, the ocean view. There was something surreal about that evening and everyone was bathing in it. Tucked away in a favourite corner of mine, I was doing the same. Suddenly, to my right, appears this guy, short, very long black hair and strangely layered for such gorgeous weather. Around his shades you could see the etches of a rough face. For 5 minutes he stood next to me, shoulder to shoulder, seemingly admiring the ocean view directly ahead of us both until he began to speak. His English was broken, with mentions of beauty, the sky and water. I agreed in few words and we were silent again. As time went on, what stood out to me were a few things. He seemed anxious. It was subtle, and not the kind you get from breaking the ice with strangers. He kept looking over his shoulder at something. It wasn't the folks passing by. Maybe it was nothing in particular. Like I said earlier, at this point in my life, society's outliers would drift near me before passing on, for comfort, somebody to vent to, cry with, and empty themselves of stories. Maybe he was that. At least I thought this until he started mentioning he had a car tucked away in the reeds just beyond the boardwalk. I said nothing. He mentioned it 3 more times, and each time he started to sweat a little more and grow less composed by my indifference until abruptly breaking away in a slow stroll while whistling and carefully surveying the other people passing by. I distinctly remember being thrown off the fact that underneath his black jacket and black zipper hoodie, he was wearing what appeared to be a worn-out nurse uniform. It was basically rags, but was a full set of scrubs. It was odd because one look at this guy and you knew that just wasn't his thing. He was a wanderer. I knew that much, and that uniform felt out of place. It struck me as something artificial, uncanny even. As he paced back and forth, I could still see him, and to be honest, I felt like someone burdened with a grim awareness. In my gut, I knew he was hunting. But how do you convey that urgency to a group of strangers? I left the boardwalk, but before that, I simply mentioned to a passing parent that there's a strange man walking around and that they'd know him when they saw him. I don't think much about what would have happened if I went to the secret car of his, or if there was even a secret car to begin with, but I do think about everyone else that was out there with him as the sun went down. I just went into the murder-suicide house on my street. Nothing had been touched since the bodies were removed nearly a year ago. Not even the mattress where the bodies sat decomposing for weeks. Most of the neighbours on our street are friendly. We look out for each other. We text, chat, say hello when we see each other, etc. It's a sweet feeling of community. In the past, there had only been one household that wasn't interested in being friendly with any of us. An elderly woman, mid-70s, we'll call her Maud, and her son, mid-50s, we'll call him Don. We'd, my partner and I, attempt to wave and say hello, only to be met with cold stares. Once, my dog managed to slip out of his collar and run through their yard while Maud was out getting the mail. The glare I received from her while trying to catch the dog left me with a feeling hard to shake. You know that unexpected gut punch feeling when you become the object of a stranger's misery and hatred? Anyway, we learned quickly to stay out of their way. We barely ever saw Don. The blinds were always closed tight. They rarely left the house, and no one ever visited. I last saw either of them at the beginning of August 2021. Don was getting the mail while wearing blue latex gloves. Thought it was weird. In early October, one of our other neighbours reached out to ask if we'd seen Maud or Don recently. We hadn't. Suddenly, we were all too aware that their grass was over 3 foot tall and the mailbox was so full that it couldn't close anymore and papers were spilling out into the street. Obviously, a welfare check was called. The neighbour who'd put herself in charge of directly communicating with the police called shortly after the check and told us to sit down. Maud and Don were both dead and had been dead for about 6 to 8 weeks. It appeared to be a murder-suicide, the assumption being that he killed her. I paced the rest of the day in front of my living room windows, watching the crime scene van pull up, the officers in and out of the front door, taking breaks to somebody chat in the front yard. And then, after a few hours, out came the body bags. The smell was something I'd never experienced before and will never forget. The following weeks, I thought of how many times I'd walked by that house with my son and dog while 2 bodies sat rotting. I stayed up for hours, a few nights in a row, trying to find out anything I could. Nothing. No news stories, crime reports, nothing. So I dug into Maud's history. All I could find was that she'd been buried in a field north of town dedicated to the unclaimed. I kept a close watch on the house and researched the legal proceedings it would go through since there was no kin. Looking at that house had always felt cold and sad before, but now it felt dark too. Haunted. I became obsessed with Maud's story with no way of getting answers. Her house just staring back at me blankly every single day. Back in the spring, my young son and I were out catching fireflies. We would stand still, waiting for one to blink and run in that direction. It took us up and down the street multiple times. I know this is such a small, silly detail, but that night I stared into Maud's yard for minutes at a time, waiting to see a firefly, and I swear not a single firefly blinked over there. I became so bothered by it that I stared longer, sure that if I just stared long enough I would see one, but nothing. Complete stillness and darkness. I told my husband that I hoped someone would buy the property and knock the house down. No one had any business living there now. Today, around a year after they died, the doors were opened and people I hadn't seen before were in and out, carrying bag after bag of what looked like junk. I texted a neighbour and asked for intel. He said the house and all of its belongings had been collectively sold and bought at an auction 2 weeks ago. These were the new owners, probably getting ready to flip the house. I typically don't shove myself into situations, but I had just spent way too much time thinking about Maud, wondering who she was, why she was so angry, and imagining what strange life her and her son had been living and what their last moments were like. I knew I'd regret it forever if I didn't ask them what it was like inside. So I did, and they invited me in. One step in the front door and more puzzle pieces fell into place. This was a hoarder home. There was barely anywhere to put my feet. Stacks on stacks of fine china, pots, pans, vintage books and records, knickknacks and countless boxes filled with God knows what from the floor to the ceiling. The woman who had led me inside said, "The mattress where it happened is still here. Do you want to see it?" Slightly afraid that she'd think I was completely demented, but far more curious, I said that of course I wanted to see. She led me to a bedroom through piles and leaning stacks of junk, She walked into a cramped small bedroom with a twin-sized bed and pulled the blanket back. If you've seen what decomposition stains look like, then you can imagine what I saw. After processing it, I asked, "So, this is where Maud was found?" "I think they were both in here," the woman said. "I'm trying to piece it all together. I haven't even started in the other corner bedroom, but I'm hoping it'll give me some answers. I'll be here organising and sorting over the next few days. You're welcome to join me if you'd like." I told her that I would love nothing more. So after all of these months, I'm excited to have a chance to get some answers to everything I've been wondering. To get a sense of who Maud was. To possibly find a way to honour what seems to have been a very sad life. To maybe get some clues into why her son murdered her. Her son, who I found out shortly after seeing the house, was a deeply troubled sex offender who was charged by the FBI for child pornography and soliciting with a minor in 2014. And to hopefully do it all without any bad energy attaching itself to me. I do keep wondering, why, if this was a murder-suicide, did the police not do a deeper investigation? Is it because there were no kin to care? Anyone have any insight? I kicked my sleep paralysis demon. To set the scene, it was me, my significant other, and our 2-year-old in a 1-bedroom apartment. My 2-year-old's bed was close to the wall by the door, and our bed was on the other side of the room, but to where I could see our 2-year-old and also see the bathroom door, which was located just outside the room. It first started out with minor bad feelings, the usual walk into the apartment and feel something off, bad vibes all round. One night, while we were sleeping, I had awoken to a strange feeling that our 2-year-old was up to something that she shouldn't have been. The room is completely dark, so I sit up to have a look around, and almost immediately this small shadow catches my eye. It's my 2-year-old. She's standing at the entrance of the bathroom looking back at me, and then proceeds to sidestep into the bathroom out of my view. So I wake up my significant other and say, "Wake up! Why is the baby out of the bed? How did they climb out?" "What are you talking about? They're still in their crib asleep," said my significant other. My eyes finally adjusted to the dark and I see my 2-year-old sleeping peacefully in the crib. My heart starts picking up pace, and at this point I'm trying to figure out, who did I just see walking into our bathroom? So I get out of bed and run into the bathroom ready to catch whoever it is. I flip on the light, but the bathroom's empty. It's just me staring at my reflection in the mirror. I turn off the light and head back to bed, confused about what just happened and not too sure what I saw. Fast forward a few nights and I'm still thinking about what happened. There I am, in bed next to my significant other, 2-year-old sound asleep. Again, I wake up to this strange feeling like we're being watched. I open my eyes, but my body's still. I'm paralysed, trapped in my own body. My eyes search across the room and I look at the door to our bedroom, and what I saw made my heart drop. There was a man at our bedroom door. Something about him was off completely, like he was something otherworldly in a man's body. He was more shadow than detail, and his posture was hunched like he was trying to be quiet, like he was stalking his prey. The shadow man begins to creep towards me, lurching closer to our bed. My mind's racing and I'm thinking, tonight's the night. An invader has finally entered our home and I was the only one awake. I start planning my attack and what I'm going to do to defend my family, but my body is still immobilized. The intruder then does the unthinkable. He places one foot on my bed, then the other, and slowly starts creeping higher and higher up the bed, until he's standing over me, and in the quick moment of fear, I was able to break out and kick both my legs towards the shadow man, hoping to catch him by surprise and ready to leap at him. As I kicked up, I felt the weight of my blanket fly off my body. I wasn't going to wait to hear the sound of a thud as he fell back. I was in fight or flight, and my only focus was jumping on this thing as fast as possible and keeping my family safe. My violent kick wakes up my significant other in a panic. I get ready to pounce when I see there's no one there. "What the hell is going on?" my significant other said. "There was a man in our room. I kicked the shit out of him. He was right there." But my room's empty and dark. No man, no intruder, no sound. The silence is broken by my wife telling me to check the rest of the apartment, and I look around, but there's no one there. I go back to bed and try to sleep, but my adrenaline was still pumping, so sleep wasn't really on the table. A few months after this event, we decided to move and upgrade to a bigger place to live, and since moving, there hasn't been any of the bad vibes that we had at the apartment. No shadow man, no little girl, just the three of us, thankfully. A lot can happen on the job. It's a Friday morning, and I'm sitting here waiting for my truck to be loaded for work. It got me thinking about my other job and the strange things that I had been witness to while working it. I've shared a few bigger encounters already, but I'll share a few more of the not so big but still frightening things I've witnessed. To start, I'm a 43-year-old female who now drives trucks for a living, but back in the day, when I was pretty and young, I decided to work as an exotic dancer. The job paid well, and in Western Canada, where I'm from, it meant I got to travel from club to club every week and meet lots of new and interesting people. It also meant I spent a lot of time in different hotels. Most strip clubs in Western Canada are in a bar attached to a hotel. Most of those hotels are older, and as you can imagine, there are restless spirits in many. This first story happened in Fort St. John at a club called the Condil. I was still a rookie dancer, and it was my first time there. I didn't own a car yet, so a new friend I had made in my last job had offered to give me a ride there. Once we arrived, and I was lugging my 2 heavy suitcases upstairs with his help, we both noticed and remarked on the subtle but tangible feeling of darkness and oppression in the hall. My new friend Scott and I were both sensitive to spirits, and we could feel that this place had them in abundance. He helped me to my room and bid me goodbye. As I normally did every week, I began to unpack, putting my clothes in the dresser, my costumes hung in the closet, and finally, my makeup and body care bottles on the dresser before turning on the TV and sitting back in bed. That's when it happened. I heard a loud thud, and all of a sudden, it was as if a giant hand swept across the entire dresser, flinging everything on it across the room violently. I won't lie, I had my 2 suitcases open and was repacking everything within minutes. There was no way I was staying there alone. Then all of a sudden, the door to the room opened and in walked another girl with a suitcase. I had noticed the other bed, but I hadn't thought that it could possibly mean I was going to have a roomie. We stared at each other for a second, me in the middle of packing and her in the doorway. "What are you doing?" she asked me. "I'm getting the heck out of here," I replied. I gave her a quick rundown of what had happened, all the while continuing to pack. Her face grew concerned when she saw I meant to leave. "You'll get in trouble," she said. "Ask me if I care," I answered back. "What about me? I don't want to stay here alone." Finally, I paused. I didn't know this girl, but I hesitated to leave her alone. What she said was also true. Blowing off a booking would get me in trouble with the agency. "Alright, I'll stay if you promise to spend nights here with me and not take off." She gave her word, which of course by Wednesday she had broken, and I found myself alone in that hotel on more than one night. Every time I would leave the room, the lights in the long hallway, which were always on, would go off just behind me. There were knocks and strange sounds of whispers, but luckily I didn't see any spectres. That happened at the next hotel. A few years into my dancing career, and I was working in the town of Rocky Mountain House. I had been to this club and hotel a few times before, but because my dad lived about an hour's drive, I had never stayed at the hotel. This was another one of those situations where two girls would share an accommodation, in this case, a partial suite. It was the first show of the week. I was upstairs in the room and sitting on the floor with a large mirror propped up in front of me. The other girl was on first, and as I was getting ready in front of the mirror, I thought to myself, where is she? She's going to be late. No sooner did I have the thought when I saw her walk behind and past me into her bedroom. She didn't acknowledge me or turn the light on and just disappeared into the dark room. I didn't think too much about it though, just continued to get ready. But her show was in 5 minutes. Maybe she forgot. Had she laid down for a second only to fall asleep? I decided to go and wake her. I went to the door and peered in, only the room was empty. She wasn't there. But I had seen her, or at least what I thought was her. The solid shape of a girl with long dark hair going into the room. Now, in truth, this hotel always gave me the heebie-jeebies, but now I was seeing ghosts in here. It explains a lot actually. Why I was always cold when I was in that room, no matter how many blankets or layers I had on. When the other dancer walked through the door, I was pretty shaken and ashen-faced. I told her what had happened, about seeing a spirit I thought was her. She pretty much just brushed it off and we finished the night's shows. This week, for some reason, I can't remember, I wasn't able to stay at my dad's. I asked the other girl if she was planning to stay at the hotel as well, and she said she had a friend who lived in town that she could be staying with. That was a hellish week. Whatever lived there would not leave me alone, pulling my hair, creating cold spaces right in front of me and whispering my name and other things beside me. I've tried my whole life not to hear or interact with spirits. That is, until of course this next story, which I'll save to another time, because this one is getting a little long. All I can say is old hotels and bars often equal restless spirits. I heard my dead cat last night. I had a cat that died 4 years ago. What's interesting about this cat though is that he would go out into the living room of every house that we'd stayed in the middle of the night and just scream "Hurrah!" over and over. He legit sounded like a person. I would have to warn guests when they stayed over that he'd do this because it would freak people out. Last night though, I heard the "Hurrah!" over and over from the living room, and it took me a minute to wake up enough to realize that I shouldn't be hearing it. I sat up in bed and kept hearing it, so I ran out to check, but the noise stopped. My other cats were sound asleep, plus they've never made that noise before. I've got no idea what to make of it. It definitely wasn't a dream like some of my friends are suggesting. And just so you know, this cat had never lived in the house that I'm currently at. I did move around a lot with him and he screamed "Hello" at every house. I'm experiencing glowing, scary eyes in an old mirror. I'm seeking answers and an explanation. Since moving into my home in June of 2020, I realised a strange effect in one of the bathroom mirrors. For a bit of background, it's a very old home built in 1912. I've never noticed any paranormal occurrences in the home before now. After taking a hot shower, when the mirror steams up, my reflection in the mirror shows my eyes glowing with strange large black orbs that glow brightly. Really, really scary, like a radiating halo of black in the centre and then glowing white radiating out to approximately the distance of where my eye socket ends. It almost looks like a hole where my eyes are, like a skeleton. It's difficult to explain, but it also hurts my eyes after looking for too long, not dissimilar to looking at the sun. It only seems to occur with steam on the mirror. Every person, different eye colours, contacts and no contacts I've shown this mirror to has seen the same phenomena. It does not photograph though, and I'm unable to see the effect in anyone else's eyes when looking at the other person's reflection. There is another mirror directly across from it, and when looking at my reflection of the affected mirror in the non-affected mirror, I still can't see it. After discussing it with my family, my mum says that she generally avoids the mirror entirely, even when it's not steamy, since it gives her a bad feeling. Does anyone know if there's a scientific explanation for this? Could the mirror be haunted? There's little or no info on the internet, only old forums where some people have experienced some similar things. Please let me know if anyone else has experienced this. Thank you for listening once again to these spooky, supernatural and scary stories. Please support the channel by comment, liking, subscribing and sharing.